Okay, thank you very much guys for coming along. This is my presentation about childhood obesity. And to start with, we are going to have a theme that we're going to look at, and we're going to look at who's to blame for childhood obesity, and can we point the finger at anyone, or is it a collective 21st century problem? So childhood obesity is something that we've only really recently come about as a health problem, and it's the biggest problem that we face in the 21st century with regards to health-related illnesses. It's an epidemic that is sweeping across predominantly the Western world. It was first seen in adults, but now children have got huge proportions as young as 8 months old as well. So obesity, basically summed up, is caused by too much energy being consumed through food or drink, so calories, and not enough activity being done to get rid of the excess energy, and that's what begins the cycle behind it. Obesity can lead to a huge number of health problems that are all directly related to it. So diabetes is on the rise, especially type 2, heart disease, some cancers are caused by it, sleeping disorders, and depression, which is quite a major factor behind it as well. Okay, so the first theme, I'm going to show you some statistics to start with, which are quite worrying. So a lot of people blame obesity on genetics, which is actually incorrect, because only 5 to 10% of the population have health problems which lead to weight gain, something that's like an underactive thyroid. A study was taken in Scotland of primary school children entering primary 1, and so they're 4 to 5 years old, and 15% of them are classified as overweight or obese, which means that they're over the 91st centile to the 100th centile, which is quite worrying. And this was only taken with 52,000 people. So this suggests that a fifth of them are in the overweight category, which is again quite alarming. 31% of children between age 2 and 15 are now classified as overweight or obese. Again, quite a scary statistic when you think about it. And the costs that illnesses related to obesity bring to the NHS are roughly about 5 billion. Adults currently are sitting at 61% that are overweight or obese, which is again a huge statistic. So the first theme of the argument is, can we blame parents for this obesity crisis? And here are some of the facts that go on to that. So here's a nice chubby toddler. So the first problem with some parents is the denial. So they blame it on the genetics of, oh, he's just big boned and things like that. But the other problem is they tend to think that children will grow out of it. However, overweight is now being seen as the norm, and it's just generally accepted that people are now overweight, whereas obviously this isn't the case, and children shouldn't be overweight, and they should have enough activity to ward off getting obese as well. There's also a direct link. There's a direct link between areas of social deprivation. They tend to have a higher level of obesity, which can be linked to the lack of education and lack of food knowledge. So this tends to be passed down through generations. The inability to cook leads to the rise of the 99p ready meal that gets bunged in, and the kids get fed that, and we all know that they tend to be high in fat or sugar. Snacks are also a massive problem. Children just get handed packets of crisps to shut them up. And health visitors are now seeing problems with children as young as 3 months old being fed Iron Brew fritters instead of weaning them properly, which is quite scary as well. And then, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Pavlov's dog theory, the classic conditioning, where when they ring a bell, the dogs know that they're being fed, and this is now being seen in children as well. At York Hill Hospital, they're doing a study, and it's children, the youngest is 8 months old, and it's predominantly 2-year-olds that are seen as morbidly obese, and it tends to be a problem that the parents feed the children when they cry, and the children then associate food with comfort. So it's now begun that children will cry because they know they're going to get food and comforted. And a similar thing is that, Mary, you might know, that children that are bottle fed tend to eat more because they don't know when they're full, and they're fed till the bottle is empty, whereas a breastfed child tends to just stop when they're full. So these are the problems that they're seeing, that children are now eating so much that an 8-month-old parents were told the other day that he would never walk because of his weight at that age, which is shocking as well. So what we're going to have a quick look about, you guys are all educated people, and obviously I said that there's a link of lack of education. So my next slide, I'm going to quiz you a bit and see if you know what it actually is, because this apparently has been rolled out in all primary schools and is a general public health message, but I'm not sure everyone's actually seen it. So this is a pie chart, and I'm not sure if you've ever seen it before. No? Okay. I'll give you a clue. It's called the Eat Well plate. Okay. So there's 5 sections on it. My challenge to you is if you can decipher what the different sections are. This has got to do with what we should have on our plate and how much we should have on our plate. I'll tell you how much, but first of all, if you could work out the different sections. So the green and the yellow are the largest, which suggests we should have most of them in our diet. And then the pink and the blue are similar size, and the purple is just quite a small size. So do you have any ideas of what it might be?
It's green vegetables.
Okay, right. So green is fruit and vegetables. Okay, so that we all know that we're supposed to have our 5 a day. What else do you think?
I'd say either yellow or pink are carbohydrate. I can't quite work out what
Yeah,
food
you're right. So yellow is carbohydrates.
So it means the pink's meat.
Yeah. Don't know which way around it. Meat and protein. So for vegetarians, that could be alternatives like corn, beans go in that section, and eggs as well.
Dairy, is that the blue one?
Yeah, well done. Oh, wrong way around. So I've just given you the blue. And so the purple is foods that are high in fat or sugar or salt. Now, technically we don't need them in our diet, but if you told someone you're not allowed to have it, they're going to ignore you and they're going to eat it anyway. So the easiest way for the NHS to go about it is to say that people are allowed that purple food. So they are allowed that treat food, because you know yourself, if there's a packet of biscuits, you're not going to be like, oh no, I'm not allowed that. You are just going to have one. And so this is trying to encourage people. And the simplest way to think about portion size is if you look at the palm of your hand, and so pretend you've chopped off your fingers, that is your portion size. Okay? So fruit and vegetable, we all know we're supposed to have 5 portions. So an apple would fit in that portion quite nicely, and that is your apple. And so you're supposed to have 5 or more of them. Carbohydrates, now 6 to 14. A large bowl of cereal is probably about 3 portions. Whereas 14, we're not Olympic athletes. I mean, Sylvia, if you train for the Commonwealth, you know, we don't need 14 portions of carbohydrates in a day. We maybe only need, depending on what we're doing in a day, some days you obviously need more. So 14 is more for the elite athletes. We probably average about 8. Protein and dairy products are both the same, 2 to 3. So that might be a yogurt you have, a portion of cheese, and then foods, the purple foods, they are 1 to 2. So I have brought in my bag of goodies. Okay, so there are quite a lot of foods that go in the purple, sadly. Things like sausages, they're really high in fat, although they are a meat, they don't get to go in the pink section. So this is just an idea of some of the foods that we have in our Eat Well, and we can have a look at them later. Okay, so the second argument I've got is who's to blame for the obesity crisis is to do with modern society. And the first thing to look at is sort of the ready meal industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Supermarkets are constantly developing new products. The Waitrose do a summer range, Sainsbury's do a summer range. They're forever changing. In the winter you get the new stews that come out. There's a huge promotion behind doing low-fat ones, but still the preservatives that go into the ready meals, they're obviously high sugar and fat, and even the low-fat versions have still got a huge amount of preservatives to keep them. The other problem is takeaways, and there's been a study done in Glasgow about high schools, and it was 5 high schools were looked into, and within a 10-minute walk of these high schools there were food outlets, so shops, mainly chip shops and kebab shops, and the students were watched going in and out for I don't know how many weeks, and basically what was seen was the main purchases were sugary drink, chocolate, crisps and sweets. Nobody was seen to buy fruits or water, and from the 5 high schools there are 30 outlets within a 10-minute walk of the high schools, so that's like 5 to each high school, or 6 to each high school even. Which again is quite alarming, considering the whole school is supposed to be promoting healthy eating. Primary schools now must, as part of their curriculum for excellence, have food and nutrition as part of that as well. The other problem is obviously time and working families, and that's only sort of a recent in the past 30 years that both parents now tend to work, which means again this reliance on takeaways and ready meals, just because there's not seen as the time. And again, sort of that ties in with the parents of the fact of the lack of education. You can get a soup bag for £1 or 80p to £1 depending on what supermarket you're in, and that could quite happily feed a family of 5. Or you can buy a jar of pasta sauce and also a bag of pasta, and that comes to £1.50. The study's been shown. But again, if you don't have the knowledge or the time, then you're just going to rely on the £1 Happy Meal, £1 ready meal that gets stuck in the oven. The other issue is technology. 5-year-olds now have got iPads and phones and laptops, and are spending less and less time outside actually playing. 73% of children currently meet the 60 minutes a day of exercise, but these studies were only taken while they were at school, and at school they get forced to go out at playtime and lunchtime, and there's no set rule as to what exercise is classified as, so walking around the playground counts towards their 60 minutes, whereas in actual fact it needs to be slightly more active and get the heart rate going as well. So technology, the Wii and things like that as well, kids are just spending time inside, and there's the argument of it's just not safe to play outside anymore either. And then the final modern society issue is supersizing. Now this has only come about since about the 1960s, and it was a guy in American cinema that realised that people don't buy 2 portions and they don't tend to go up for seconds, so he thought it's cheap for me to bake a bigger box of popcorn. It cost him pennies, but the amount profit he could make from that larger portion was huge. He then went on to McDonald's and tried the same theory, and that's why we now get our Big Macs and our double cheeseburgers and things like that, because people will eat it. Food is also available to us 24/7. You cannot walk down the street without seeing a takeaway, and you can get all sorts of food from throughout the world. But again, it tends to be food that's high in fat, sugar or salt, which is what causes obesity. However, it's not all doom and gloom. We do have some preventative measures. So the government and council have had to take action just because the crisis has become so bad. Within Glasgow, there's a partnership between the NHS and Glasgow Life. And because we've been focusing on Glasgow, the ACES programme is the family programme, where families go along for a 12-week programme, and they do 3 weeks worth of cooking, and they do the rest is food knowledge, and they also do an activity every week. So it's split. It's a 2-hour session. 1 hour is practical classroom work, and the other is swimming, Activate, dance mat type things, tennis, badminton. So they're coming together as a family because it's difficult to change one person's behaviour, and the whole point is to change as a family. The Active Choices programme has been rolled out in schools, and a coach goes in to take the heights and weights, but also deliver an 8-week programme, not only targeting the obese children but also targeting the rest of the class. There's nothing to say that a child of a healthy weight will stay that way, which is quite sad but true. So the coach goes in to work on, again, food topics, and especially body image as well, and how changing body images, because the images that we see in the public eye in magazines and things like that, they aren't necessarily a true representation of what the person is like. So these programmes have been put in place to help prevent childhood obesity and to curb it. The other one was introduced after wartime, and it's our 5-day, which is a public health message that I'm pretty sure everyone knows because it's very well advertised. But realistically, 13% of boys and 12% of girls only meet that, and that's up to the age of 18, meet their 5-day, which averages out as 2.7, which is quite shockingly low. So again, although it's a public health message that everyone knows, it's maybe not taken that seriously. So in conclusion, I think it's part of both. It's not just the parents' fault, and society does have a role to play, and also in preventing it. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Yes.
So you mentioned earlier that quite a lot of schools have loads of takeaways nearby. Do you think that it would be good to make the efforts that people like you are doing, teaching families about the benefits of eating healthily, do you think it should be a joint effort by the government to move those takeaways away from schools?
Yeah, there is talk about taxing takeaway food higher, and I think definitely that is a thing. But realistically, you can't stop people going, and it's the parents, and it was the school in England, and the parents, they moved the burger van, and the parents started to stick burgers and chips through the school gates. So it has to be a collaboration between the school, the government and the parents. And the parents are the difficult group to target, because they never get a chance to sit down and actually be taught something. It's very difficult to gather parents. But yes. Anything else?
Because there's such a familiar trend with obesity, do you think when you go in and teach the schools that if there's a family where they're all obese, that the child will go back and possibly talk to the parents in a positive way about?
Again, because I work in schools and it's clear some are in the socially deprived areas where some are in less socially deprived areas. The schools of less social deprivation, the parents are much more involved, and you see a better positive outcome with the diaries and things like that, and actually documenting what they eat. Whereas the schools of lower social deprivation, the parents seem to be less interested, and it's very difficult to target the children. They do get sent a letter and referral and invited on the ACES family programme, but the actual uptake is very poor behind it. But then again, you can't force anyone to do it. There's an argument about rationing, and they will never come into place, but nutritionists are currently arguing about whether rationing would be a good idea to help curb the obesity crisis, but then again that goes into human rights and things like that. So that will never happen, but it's that sort of thought behind it, because you cannot force somebody to go. Like the programme at York Hill, these really toddlers, if they stop coming, they just automatically get discharged. It doesn't get followed up, it doesn't get stopped or anything like that. So it's how to keep people on programmes or how to access them as well that's the biggest problem.
Do you think the programmes that you're running in schools, the ACEs and things like that, are actually working? And do you think it would be good to continue them as they are, or do changes need to be
Currently
made?
funding is being cut, which is ridiculous considering the crisis is just getting worse. The school programme doesn't cost anything, it just costs a coach's wage, whereas the family programme costs about £600 per person taking part. So I think that needs to be looked at into reducing the cost and also how to access people. But I think the schools programme does have a positive effect because it's educating the children who then tend to go home and tell mum and dad something. But how much of it actually sticks and continues, there's no study to show that. But I definitely think it's a worthwhile thing to do.
When it comes to tackling the obesity crisis, do you think that it's dietary control over exercise? Which one do you think is most important, or is it a combination of both?
Since looking into it further, the fact that children are apparently getting their daily recommended exercise, I think it's got to be dietary control, because there's foods, Special K for example, that is really high in sugar and gets classified in the purple section due to the sugar content, whereas Special K is advertised as a weight loss product. So there's this huge gap between advertisers, again, are not allowed to lie to you, but on a yogurt, a kid's yogurt, it always says high in calcium, but it would never say high in sugar because we wouldn't purchase it. And that's the problems behind it. Parents are buying products that they think are maybe better for the child, but realistically they haven't read the food label and it could actually be worse. Walker's Baked are another example. Yes, they're lower in fat, but they're much higher in sugar by about 5 grams than a normal packet of crisps. So I think that dietary control is now more important. It's the same with McDonald's Happy Meals. Children are being given Big Macs and things like that. The Happy Meal is the perfect portion size for them up until the age of 15, 16. That's how much food they should have, whereas in actual fact they're going for the Big Macs and the large chips and the giant milkshake. That's just too much excess food that they don't actually need.